Everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm very excited for today's episode. We're going to be starting one of our first classic truck builds. Today we're going to be working on a 1965 Chevy C10. It's a short bed step side. We're going to be doing a will it run video today. We picked up the vehicle a little bit over a year ago. The truck had been sitting, not running, not moved for over 17 years where we found it. I'm going to be, after this, I'm going to be showing you a segment of us grabbing it from where I had it stored, and then we'll get on to working on it and getting it running. But more or less, I picked up the vehicle. It had been sitting for over 17 years, not moving, not running. It's a pretty solid vehicle, short bed, step side. I want to try and get it running first. If we get it running, I'd like to convert it to a short bed fleet side. It's pretty much same frame and everything, so all you have to do is swap out the bed from the step side bed to a fleet side bed. Probably work on the stance, either airbag it or lower it, and then see what else we can do to it just to make it a clean street truck. Again, let's get started on this truck. It's going to be a nice build. Stay tuned. We're going to do multiple episodes on it. Like I said, it's going to be a nice build, so let's get started.
So this is where I store a lot of my projects that I haven't gotten a chance to get around to, or stuff that I've started and just stopped for the meantime. Right here we got a 65 C10 pickup truck. Right here we got a 63 Volkswagen Bug. This Bug's got semaphores. It's got a lot of early conversion stuff that I've done to it already. It's a real nice Bug. 63 short bed step side pickup in the garage right here. We'll go around back. Have a 59 Volkswagen convertible. This is a big project. This one, somebody had cut the front clips off. We have a 58 Volkswagen convertible project. Also, somebody cut the front clips off. Another Volkswagen, another spare clip over here. We have a couple classic trucks, a Nova, some other projects, a bunch of parts. If you see anything here that you'd like me to bring back to the shop and work on the channel, just message below and we can get that on a future episode. Right now we're going to be picking up the 65 C10 and taking that back to the shop and working on that. Now we're about to load up the C10. I'm going to put this on time lapse, let you guys watch. Let's go. Alright, this is our C10. I'm going to pull you off the tripod, give you a once over on it, and then we'll get started on seeing if we could get it running. Alright, as I said earlier, it's a 65 C10 short bed step side. I did swap out already the front grille for a 63, so if any of you spotted that, yeah, that's a 63 front grille on it. I tend to like 63 grills better. I pulled off the front fenders on this because they are a little roached. I'll be showing you how to patch those in a later video. Under the hood, this is what we're working with right now. Somebody had put in an electric fan. We'll be pulling that out. Radiators leaking. You can see where it's been patched a few times, and still leaking in various places. So we'll be swapping that out. Alternator will be upgrading if we get it running. Most likely carb will have to be gone through. Looks kind of stuck and dry. These things also are notorious for leaking anyways. So like I said, we'll go through some stuff and see where we are on it. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty solid. And C10s are notorious for certain rust areas, bottom of fenders, cab corners. It looks like somebody did patch the bottom of this cab corner with some Bondo. Not the correct way to do it. But C10s are notorious for cab corners, bottom corners of doors, and bottoms of fenders. The 60 through 66s. Sometimes also too underneath the roof. This one's not too bad. And then the inside too. I don't think this one was that bad either. This one was pretty solid underneath there. Floors were pretty good on this. Just some surface rust, which we'll take care of. But overall, it is a decent truck. So it should make for a good project. And like I said, if we do get it running, I do want to swap out the bed for fleet side. These don't have any of the markings on whether or not they're fleet side or step side on the VIN, nor do they have any identification on the SPID. The 67 through 72s do have it on the glove box SPID, so you would know whether or not they are fleet side or step side. So the 60 to 66 are a perfect vehicle if you pick up a shortbed step side and you want to make it a shortbed fleet side. Swap out that box and nobody will even know. The VIN will just say that it's a original shortbed vehicle, so it basically come out as a shortbed fleet side. Let's get started on this and see if we can get it running, and if so, then basically we'll start customizing it and making it a cool street truck. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start by hooking up a bump start to the starter solenoid, see if we can get this thing cranked over. Before I crank it over, I just want to check and make sure that there's oil in the bottom of the oil pan, and then we'll get going on that. So I hook one side to the starter post. Usually on GM cars it's purple. Connect the battery terminal, negative, and then I'm going to hook the other side over here to the positive post of the battery. I'm going to make sure we're in neutral. Check the oil. So it looks like we definitely have oil in the engine.
Good sign. Sounds good. Alright, so ignition. Starter switch, ignition switch inside. Somebody tried finagling and doing their own wiring to this vehicle, so none of that's proper inside, so we're gonna have to run a wire from the coil to the battery post here. Let's see if I could cut one of these wires and just run it. Grab a wire from the garage. Alright, so I cut a short piece of wire. I'm going to connect it from our ignition wire this is disconnected here. So it looks like they disconnected the distributor from the coil too. Let's connect this. Fuel line, so probably have to put a fuel line on it and a temporary fuel tank. Fuel pump looks fairly new on it. See if I could probably pour some gas down the carburetor. See if put a gas tank in here temporarily just to fire it up.
Make sure you grab the dullest utility knife you have. And then I poured out some gas into this container. We'll pour that into the carburetor. Wow. The other one actually siphons. Sounds like it almost wanted to kick off. So we're already getting some leaking. Like I said, these are notorious for, these single barrels are notorious for leaking, especially when they're old. So it's most likely sucking gas up into here at this point from the fuel pump. Almost, right? There you go, she's on. She started. She's running on her own. It doesn't seem like she wants to stay on. Carburetor most likely needs to be tuned or adjusted. It might not be either. It might not be sucking enough gas basically at idle just to keep it running. So it might just need an adjustment just to keep it running at idle, or just basically because it's old and dried up. That's most likely it. I don't think it's the timing because when I was actually throttling it, I didn't feel really any hesitation on it. The engine sounded decent. I didn't hear any major knocking or ticking on it. It's kind of loud. I think this is 292 or 290 something. It's the larger inline six. Again, basically, I'll probably play with it a little bit. I would like to swap out the ignition to HEI. I'm not really a fan of points, and I would like to swap out that carb. So since we got it running, let's probably pull off the ignition and do that now, and then let's probably get this radiator out too, and swap in a newer radiator, and then it'd probably be a good thing to check out that water pump and maybe swap that out as well. Like I said, since this engine runs, it's got a stick shift behind it. Usually those are bulletproof. I'm pretty sure, I want to continue on with this build and get it going. So let's just basically start fixing it up. Alright, so since the carburetor is leaking the most and seems to be giving me the most issues, I'm going to probably start with that first. Distributors and timing seems to be decent on it, so I'm not going to really worry about that. I'll do that second. I'm still going to try and do both in this episode, but let's get started with the carburetor first. Let's disconnect the fuel line and then take off these 2 bolts and this vacuum line, and then see if we can swap that out. Alright, so we got the carburetor off. We're going to be installing a new carburetor. I'm not going with the factory carburetor. I'm going with the fully adjustable. It's a 3236 dual carburetor. So it's got electric choke, fully adjustable, and it's got an adapter plate to fit on here. It's quite a upgrade from what came factory on these, and it should give us a lot more power and then adjustability. The single barrels gave a lot to be desired from these inline sixes. These inline sixes had quite a bit of power, but the single barrel carburetor is pretty much just on or off. It didn't really have much. You didn't have much adjustability as far as how much gas you're really giving the motor. This, gives you a lot more adjustability. Plus, you have the electric choke. Plus, it's a brand new unit. You don't have to rebuild that unit. And then we're going to go with the HEI Ignition. So with these two in combinations, it should wake up this engine quite a bit, and then bring the reliability factor up also quite a bit. So let's get this installed. Also, let me show you what the adapter plate looks like. So it basically attaches to the intake manifold using the same square design as the original, and then it comes up and adapts to the new carburetor. So let's get this on. Alright, you're going to want to make sure your mating surface for your gasket is extremely clean, so I'm going to go over it with a DA and just a scrubbing disc. So it's not sandpaper, it's basically just a scrubbing disc. Alright, carburetor's all hooked up and everything. Let's see if we get this thing fire up again. Runs smoother than before. Probably turn up the idle a little bit. Definitely stays on nice and idle now. At this point it's sucking more gas and I am getting a hesitation when I throttle it now. So now we've got, which I didn't get before, so now it could be the timing. So I'd want to basically go through and change the HEI Ignition and then get it timed right. And then also to adjust the air and fuel mixture on the carburetor to get it really dialed in. But it idles, it's basically not running as high idle as it was before. You have a lot more adjustment with this carburetor than you had the other carburetor. And the engine sounds better now. So let's get started on swapping out the ignition and go from there. Alright, now that we got the carburetor installed, it's time to put on the HEI Ignition. We can start by removing things that we don't need. We know that we don't need the coil, so we can pop that off, get that out of the way. Then we want to go through and mark basically a reference mark for the current distributor. The way that it's placed in, basically the positioning of the rotor, since we know that this engine runs and the timing is pretty good on it. It does need to be dialed in perfect to be perfect, but it's actually running, not missing or anything like that majorly. So we want to reference the position of the rotor before we pull it out, so we can put the new distributor in and not have any major timing issues. And then basically what I like to do is mark all the spark plug cables and then the cap and everything, so that even if you don't know the timing order of the engine that you're working on, you could just basically, as long as the engine has all its current spark plug cables in place and you know that you started it and ran, you can use that as a reference of plugging everything back in place and you won't have any issues. So let's get started on that. I'll bring you over a little bit closer so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Also, before you start working on any of this, you want to make sure that you disconnect either the positive or negative battery cable. I have the negative battery cable disconnected for this. Now, I'm marking these spark plug cables. It's not in any particular order. I'm just going from front to back, so it's not in firing order. Just 1 through 6. And then the reference marks on the valve cover, I'm going to also put back 1 through 6. So this way, when we're plugging them back in, I'm going to actually end up replacing these spark plug cables, but when we're using them for a reference, we know where they go. Basically be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we can use the distributor cap as a reference. Again, like I said, it's not in any particular order as far as firing order. But I'm just basically going to use it to line them up and not lose track of them. Now you want to reference the position of the rotor. The rotor basically turns around and sparks each one of the spark plug cables, which sends the spark to the different spark plugs. Right now it's at the 6, 7, probably about 7 o'clock position. So what I usually do is I'll put a piece of tape on the inner fender well and mark it like that. This way, when I'm putting in the new distributor, I'll I'll get it timed pretty much close to where it is. Since it's pretty dusty down here too, I'll probably even scribe a line in the dust. Alright. So the next thing is to loosen up the clamp on the distributor, pull that. Actually, before I do that, let me swap out these spark plugs. I'm going to check them first. If they look fairly new, I might reuse them, but most likely I'm going to swap them out. The new HEI allows us to go with a wider gap, so if these are decent, I'll reuse them. I'll possibly clean them up and re-gap them. Otherwise, I'll swap them out and then re-gap those to a wider gap. So let me check these right now. Alright, all the spark plugs are re-gapped and put back in. Time to pull the distributor out, clean up the mounting surface for the distributor, put the new one in, start buttoning everything up and putting everything back in. Alright, old distributor's out, and I clean the mounting surface. Get ready to put the new one in. Try not to get any debris inside the hole. Alright, so the HEI distributor we're using is from CRT Performance. Found it online. They have a good reputation. So we'll be putting it in. I'll test it out and let you guys, well, you guys can actually see how it actually works. So the first thing you want to do is start by removing the cap. This way when we drop it into place, we could line up the rotor and drop it in with the correct timing that we pulled the other one off with. So when you remove the cap, you want to make sure that you unplug the connections from the cap on this. Set the cap aside where it won't get damaged while you're working. So what you want to do first is get your gasket, slide it on the shaft, line up your vacuum advance where you want it, where it's going to be out of the way. Also your pigtail where you want it, where it's going to be out of the way. Set your rotor to where the other one was. Remember when you drop it in, the rotor's going to set in place and kind of twist a little bit. So you might have to clock it a little bit further than where you want it. Also, if you look down the hole, you can see the slot where this sits in, which is basically the oil pump. Which is pretty much where I have it right now. So let's see if this works. Actually, I want this a little bit further. Do this. So I'm gonna try and turn that oil pump just a little bit because my timing's off a little bit than what I want it. Bam, dead on. Okay, this is good. All right, let's put the clamp on, start wiring everything up, and then we can test fire it. All right, so it's snugged up just enough so I can adjust it, but it's not going to pop up, or it's not going to actually cause any issues once we start it and run it. So let's clean this up, get the cap on it, plug the spark plug cables in, and hook up the wiring to the key and ignition. Alright, so we're going to put 8mm spark plug cables on here. So again, we're going to go from front to back, working our longest to shortest spark plug. We're going to use the reference marks that we made, and then we're going to pull the other distributor cap to get our order back in place. Alright, that looks actually really good compared to the old one. So the only thing right now we have to do is get power from the old resistor to this. The old coil uses a resistor wire that cuts down 12 volts so that the coil doesn't see a full 12 volts. This unit needs to see a full 12 volts. So what I'm going to do is, what I'm going to do is this. I got two relays here. Since we installed the carburetor a couple days ago, that has an electric choke on it. So one relay will be for the carburetor. The other relay will be for the ignition. I'm going to come right off of the resistor. Basically, it doesn't have a resistor wire, but it has a ballast. So this is a 12 volt ignition going into the ballast, which drops the voltage down. I'm going to keep all that in case I get rid of the truck, anybody wants to go back to the stock system, or in case you're stranded on the street and let's say this HEI goes bad and you want to go to any mom and pop store, AutoZone, O'Reilly's, whatever, and just get a stock distributor, toss it in here. You still have the stock ballast right there, and you can basically go back to stock. All the stock wires are right there. So I'm going to come right off of that with two relays. I'm going to use that 12 volts coming off of that, which is drop down to trigger my relay, because remember, a relay only needs basically a small bit of voltage to trigger it. And then I'm going to run a large gauge cable into it and out of it to power the distributor, and then a smaller gauge cable just to power the choke, the electric choke. On both of them I'm using a 1 amp diode. I don't really need it for the choke, but I definitely need it for the distributor. So anytime you're drawing high amperage, you want to use a diode on your relays to protect the relays and also to keep them from popping or snapping. You're going to hear that pop and snap. Basically what it is an electric, basically an electric spark going across the points in the relays. It'll cause the relay to break down over time and fail. So I have that actually in line. So let me get that going. I'm gonna basically run a wire. This white wire is gonna go from here back inside under the dash to power the relays. This black wire is gonna go to ground. And then I have actually a 4-gauge cable going into the truck and going into a distribution block. From that, I'm going to probably use a 12 or 10 gauge cable going into the back of these, and then the same size I'm going to run to the distributor, and maybe like a 16 gauge going to the electric choke. And I'm going to try and reuse the same hole here, or maybe this hole here that's open, and run a grommet, and then just come back here, use these same clips on the valve cover and drape down here and go into the distributor, and maybe jump across there and go to the choke. Try and keep it as clean as possible. So let's get started on wiring of this. Alright, so that'll trigger the relays. I mounted the relays behind the dash right here. I'm going to ground them right now, and then run power to them, and then basically run the 2 leads out here. So this is a fabric loom. Give you a close-up on it. Focus. So this makes a big difference on if you're doing your own wiring. What makes an ordinary wiring job look much better, especially on a classic car. So you have just a plain piece of wire, plus it protects it, but on a classic car, you put some fabric loom on it, just makes it look a million times better. Run one cable now for the distributor, and that's it.
We do
everything's connected under here. We just need to make a couple more connections underneath the dash, and then we could test fire this thing. Other than that, everything looks pretty decent under here. Alright, so that should be it. So let's hook up our remote bump stop and test this thing out. Alright, we got power here. Let me turn on the ignition. Make sure the car's in neutral. Get our gas tank. Alright, here goes nothing. All right, let's start it with key. Or try with key. It's not bad. That pretty much does it for today's episode. Everything turned out pretty good. Everything pretty much works smoothly. I just pretty much dialed it in by ear. I still want to put a timing light on it, but there's still a lot more to do on the truck. Swap out radiator, upper and lower radiator hoses. I'd want to do a water pump and thermostat. And then we're going to end up doing front brakes with drop spindles and lowering coils or bags. Next episode, I'm most likely going to end up taking the rear bed off and going with a short bed fleet side. So stay tuned for that. Again, if you haven't done so already, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out a lot. Again, thank you everybody for viewing. I really appreciate it. That wraps it up for this episode. See you in the next episode.